That's true. Naked Palpatine.
Oh, you pick that one. Fresh out of the clone tank, nude Palpatine is my
Well, that's the first thing I think of when you say Dark Empire Palpatine.
Oh gee, oh boy. Where do I even begin? Hi, welcome back to the Ice Books, and by ice I mean Ian C. Esselmont, and by Ian C. Esselmont I mean the books of the Malazan Empire with ORB Sceptre Throne, which I'll give you my negative real quick. The three different books in this novel, Orb, Scepter, and Throne. That's the best we could do for the book titles. Come on, Ian. I know you can do better than that. I'm just playing. It is really funny though, because Erickson always has like the really like cool like name for whatever the book is, and then it's just the title of the novel split in 3 sections, which I thought was funny. Here's the thing about Orb Sceptre Throne. Return of the Crimson Guard. You don't need to know too much about the Book of the Fallen. You do kind of. I mean, it explains it enough itself within Return of the Crimson Guard, but there's the whole thing with Malik Rel and Lysine and the whole power structure that we kind of learn about at the end of the Bone Hunters. And then, the big thing with Lysine's death in the end of Return of the Crimson Guard was a big thing. Bigger ramifications, I'm sure, for the last 2 books in the Book of the Fallen. But I'm just saying, like, outside of that, you didn't really need to know anything from Erickson's work to enjoy that one. And then Night of Knives is a prequel, so you truly don't need to know any other story to enjoy that one. You just need to read that to get it. Because it takes place before any context of Erickson anyway, so it doesn't really conflict anywhere. Like, you could potentially start with Night of Knives, and that would be your introduction to Malazan. Stonewielder, I mean, it's picking up plot points from Return of the Crimson Guard, so you would need to have read other Ian C. Esselmont's works, but with that one specifically, there is a small thing there with the crippled god connection, but outside of that, you really don't need to read any of Book of the Fallen to enjoy Stonewielder. And I say that all to say that to enjoy Orb Sceptre Throne to its full extent, you really need to have read Toll the Hounds. Because this one, like, so many plot points and characters and things here are springing off of that book. I'm assuming that most of these characters aren't going to play a major role in the next 2 books, so this is kind of their conclusion. But, for example, Krupp, our wonderful man, he uses shards of Dragonpur, which, of course, if you haven't read Toll the Hounds, you're like, what do you mean shards of Dragonpur? You mean the sword that Amon Rake has? What do you mean shards? You gotta read Toll the Hounds. Plus, you would even really know about Anamander Rake if you'd only been reading the Esselmont books. But on top of that, you have a character, Traveler, who was also in Return of the Crimson Guard, but there is stuff that has happened with him in Toll the Hounds that is going to make what's going on in his story right now a bit confusing if you have not read Toll the Hounds. All this to say that this is a major, to me, companion piece to Toll the Hounds, and you can't fully appreciate this one without appreciating the other, and they kind of complement and make each other better. So, that is my thoughts on that. The story, this is going to be one of the parts that I think is a little bit, depends on what we're talking about. So the main thing is that there's the ancient tyrant that used to rule Darushistan and everything, and he's coming to power with this ancient cabal thing that we've heard about before. But it's basically the big problem. And he's a bad guy. Outside of that, I mean, they didn't really delve into the past too much about, like, what, like, I don't know. I didn't really care. The bigger thing, actually, within this is the Segula, who have been in the Book of the Fallen before, but have not had a lot of screen time. We get a lot into the society, how they work. We learn a lot about them here and their origins. Not a lot on their origins. I'd say less than I would have maybe liked to have seen. But we do get, a bit of they were native to Darushistan and that surrounding area, and then in the ancient past, they had big battles with the Morinth, the bug people, who make all the ammunition and everything. And so there's conflict there between them now, because tradition, the past, they had those sort of issues then, they're having issues now, alongside all this other stuff. Ansi, if you remember Ansi, actually becomes a wonderful character in this book. Whereas I at first I was like, I don't give a damn about Ansi. I'm sorry. No, but it was actually really good. Although I will say, and I don't have too much to say in spoilers either or non-spoilers, but Ansi's whole thing felt like a major side plot that ultimately had no relevance. I get the feeling that there are certain things that are happening in the Ansi sections that will matter for other books that Esselmont writes. But as for the story itself within this one, I don't think it really adds much to the central conflict. And yeah, so the tyrant is coming, he's doing stuff, and all of our heroes, there's separate storylines going on that eventually converge. We also have Kiska and Leoman in this other realm, and they meet up with some familiar characters, and we get a bit more mysteries, but also revelations all at once about more natures about stuff, along with stuff with Kroll. A lot of big stuff is happening in this book. For people who say that these are side stories, I don't really know how you could say that, because so many things intertwine and matter. Because I'm almost positive that some of this stuff is going to come up in the Erickson last two books. Even if this was written after the fact, which I think publication-wise it was, there's no way that this stuff doesn't matter for that. Even if Hasselmont was like, oh, I'm going to put that here, doesn't matter. This stuff is definitely going to matter at some point. So, for Kroll, for instance, is a big one, but we'll get to that. But yeah, the stuff with Kiska and Lehman was some of my favorites. The stuff that's happening with Traveler, I loved it, and it's only as good as it is because of the context of Told Hounds too. They complement one another really well. I think I still have some minor issues, like I said, with the big threat, and me not really understanding why it's a big threat or really appreciating it, or feel like I don't know if the story gave me enough to really go off and think that was something worthy of being a threat, in the sense of I don't feel like the book ever justified, oh, this is a big deal. To me, I never really felt that, but that's just me. Maybe, I don't know. But I still really enjoyed most of this book. I think it is I mean, again, I don't write things, so who am I to judge? But I think, hold on. But yeah, overall, and again, I can't speak to writing because I don't write. I am not a writer, so who am I to judge, right? But I have been watching a lot, and I mean a lot, of A Critical Dragon and Philip Chase, and I've been trying to be a better reviewer, whatever that means. And so everything that Esselmont intended on doing, I feel like he did successfully. And I definitely think, I'm just saying, not that I'm one to know what writing is like, because I don't really do it, but I feel like there's been a progression with Esselmont with every book that he's written, where it's just gotten a little bit better in every way, shape, and form, structure-wise, plotting-wise, I don't know. Night of Knives definitely felt the weakest. Return of the Crimson Guard felt a little bit better. I felt like the pacing was a little bit off. Now, pacing in of itself is subjective. There's no way to objectively measure pacing, but I personally didn't vibe with the pacing in that one. But it feels like maybe he didn't either, because then I feel like Stonewielder was better paced. I feel like this one's almost paced perfectly to me. So, I don't know. Maybe it was a thing for him too. So I'm a bad reviewer, guys. I've been reviewing stuff for years, but I don't know what I'm doing anyway. I have to say though, and this is gonna really vary with people, because I've heard mixed things. I really love Krupi in this. I think a lot of people, because I looked up some reviews online, I just wanted to see what other people thought of this book, and some people were very much oh, Erickson doesn't, or Esselmont doesn't understand Croupy and wrote Croupy terribly, but I don't think that's true, and I think that's intentional. I mean, for one, it's not the same person writing, so it's not going to be exactly the same. But I don't think it's because of a lack of knowledge or a lack of skill that Croupy comes off differently. I think we're meant to get a different perspective here. And very much so, and this is already kind of established since book one, Guardians of the Moon, that Croupy is the eel. Now, what does that fully entail? I don't feel like Erickson ever really dives into the fact as much, unless it's like for comedic effect with the stuff that Croupy does. But here you really see like, and he's benevolent. Like he's a good character. He's working on the side of goodness and righteousness and whatever else you want to say. Like he's a good person overall. But there's still a lot of things that he does in this book, which he's always kind of done. You just never really focus on it. Like Croupy is not above manipulating you into getting exactly what he wants. You know, when it comes to saving Darushistan, which is very much seems to be the case for him, you know, he'll do anything and everything. He'll put you in a perilous plight if he knows it will save the day in the end. And that's a bit of a thing that you never really pay attention to with him. But he's quite a Machiavellian, like almost like how the show Game of Thrones, which is a bit different from the novels I know, Song of Ice and Fire. But Veers in the show is definitely more of a trying to be a force for good, objectively speaking, as he plays the game, as opposed to Littlefinger, who is very selfish and trying to rise himself through the political game. Whereas Croupy is much more like Veers in this. Except that he's also super powerful. Is he a high mage of some secret sort that we don't really know about? Is he potentially a god? I don't know. Is he Erickson's and Esselmonce's Tom Bombadil? Who knows? Hold on a second. There's a lot of interruptions today. Anyway, it just shows a different side of Croupy, and I really appreciate that, and I think it works very well. Also, and again, the character Traveler. Without getting into spoilers for both Toll the Hounds and this, you know, in case you haven't read Toll the Hounds. Uh, well, sorry that you now know that Dragon Pair breaks, but I mean, um, the Traveler's arc is really good, and I'm curious to see if that will follow through in any of Erickson's works moving forward or not. Maybe not, but I guess we'll see. Um, but it makes sense for him, and I was quite happy with it. And overall, I really enjoyed it, and it's definitely my favorite Elsamont work so far. Though I hear it just continues to get better and better as he keeps writing. Like I hear like the Path to Ascendancy, like books that take place before the events of Malazan even starts is like phenomenal. So I'm excited for that. But that's gonna be it for my non-spoiler, as I've now had to redo this like 6 times. But thank you all so much for watching. I'm getting to some spoilers now. If you don't want that, time to go. Alrighty, now the spoiler section. I don't have too much, as much as I would for like a Malazan Book of the Fallen, but we do have some stuff. So the prologue, we have Eben, who is like is he an archaeologist or something? Historian? No, because Duke is a historian. I think he's like an archaeologist, and he finds this, you know, tomb that just happens to not like right outside the city, but it's nearby the city, and unleashes this ancient evil. You know, as happens. Yeah. Um, we have um, the Nash, which is a character which will matter for later. Baruch and Croupy have a nice scene in the beginning. It's always good to see Baruch. However, Baruch gets sort of kind of possessed in this book, which is unfortunate for him, but at least he's okay in the end. We have Dassam, who's no longer Traveler nor Dassam any longer. He is with the Segula, and he's basically being like a janitor. He's just basically he's been like somebody who like trains people, I guess. But he like very much doesn't want to pick up a sword ever again because he's so distraught over what he did to Animander Rake that he just can't find it in his heart to fight. At least in the beginning of this book. And then we move on to book 1, Orb. Um, we get, reintroduced or seeing what Leoman and Kiska have been up to, and their stuff's really good. I love their stuff. We get this whole thing with Vitor, which is all of creation, the first light. It's interesting because it hasn't really been explored in the main line. I don't want to say that in the Book of the Fallen yet because it hasn't really been brought up yet. But the Vitor is an interesting thing that's being talked about, and the idea that it did it exist first? I mean, darkness and light seemingly came into existence at the same time, but then light or darkness is just the absence of light. Um, but it's interesting what's going on there. Malazan Conquest, I literally forgot. So this book, talks about how the Malazans may try to take over Darushistan and Genebakis again, and it actually makes perfect sense. Well, I mean, because the first time it was happening was because of Lassine, but now Malik Rel is in charge, and I don't really know what's up with Malik Rel because we haven't really seen what he's been up to since Return of the Crimson Guard. But the only reason that Darushistan remained, independent was because, well, one, they had the Penny and Doman attacking in Book 3, and that was a big thing. And so, the Malazans needed to help that be stopped. That was the bigger thing there. Lassie knew about it, and that was the whole Machiavellian plan going on there to stop the Penny and Doman. It was the most important thing at that time. But even so, if you go earlier, I'm getting another freaking thing. This keeps happening to me. I'm so sorry. Oh my goodness, I hope it stops. I don't want it to happen again. I'm trying to avoid. I turned off my notifications, but some things go past the notifications. But the other big factor to why Darushistan and Janabakis itself hasn't been overtaken, the big thing was that we had Kaladin Brood, who's also in this book very well. He's got a very minor role, but it's at least nice that he's there to kind of see the after effects of Book 8 on him. We had Anamander Rake. So, we had these two really powerful forces that were kind of keeping the Malazans at bay. I mean, part of the thing of Book 1 was that they were fighting against the Malazans. So, now that that's kind of over, free reign, right? So I completely forgot about the fact that they might try to do that. Because especially too, the series has gotten so much larger than that initial problems with the Malazan Empire. Even though it's still a factor, it's still around, they're still actively a thing. But there's so many bigger things going on, whether it be with the gods or with Karsa or with this or with that you almost forget that the Malazan Empire is still the mundane thing in control of a good portion of the world, which is very, Cutter left, I guess. That they basically just quickly addressed that, or did he? Now, again, this is I want to preference this a little bit. This is not official in any way, shape, or form, but I did watch Philip Chase and A Critical Dragon. We should definitely subscribe to both of those people. I listened to them just talk about this book because I needed more thoughts. I still need to get over my thoughts. So he has a theory, and again, this is not, as far as I'm aware, this has not been confirmed or denied by Esselmont, so this is up for you to decide until proven otherwise. But there's this character, what's his name? What is the character's name? Malachi, in the book, and he's seemingly a new character. But one of the big things with Malachi is going to this garden that Apsalar, sorry, she has been called Sorry in so many books, but that she wanted to go to in Garden the Moon. So A Critical Dragon's theory is that Malachi is actually Crocus / Cutter, which would be a now third name for the character. Is that true? I mean, you can pick it or leave it. It kind of makes sense. But as far as this book officially tells us, he just kind of leaves after Toll the Hounds. We get reintroduced to Berethal and Solera, which was great. We have Envy and Fisher. I really don't know particularly why Envy is in this book that much, because she doesn't really, I don't think she adds that much to it. I mean, other than, well, when we first got introduced to Segula, Envy was around, right? Envy was a part of the whole thing when we got introduced to Segula as a people, so I guess we're including her again. And again, Esselmont and Erickson are very particular about the things they do. Nothing's in a book that they put in there for no reason. even if the reason's just their own amusement. You know, kind of like Botchel and Corbel Broach. You take them out of Memories of Ice, you miss absolutely nothing, but Steven enjoyed writing it. But I just didn't see the necessary to have her in this whole thing. She's not in like a huge portion of it, but she is in it. And we also get reintroduced to Fisher, which is cool. It's also something to be said that since I think Return of the Crimson Guard is when Liaman met Kiska, and there's been this running rapport between them since, which has been really cool. And it's really cool to see Liaman, who wasn't like one of the most important characters. I mean, he had his moments to shine, like in House of Chains and Bone Hunters, but he was never like the biggest, most important character in the whole grand scheme of things. So he kind of gets a lot more breath and life in these books. We also get to see our boy Torvald Nam again, and Torvald Nam is getting a seat on the council in Darushistan, which he doesn't really want, but he's getting it. We get reintroduced to Cole, which I think Cole's really cool. I think he's an underrated character. His relevance doesn't matter as much, especially in the latter half of these Malazan books. But still, I love seeing Cole and him being this politician sort of character. We also meet Jessin Lim, who's this new younger person on the council because, well, what was it? Her uncle, her dad died in the previous book due to Cutter. So, Baruchanal is the new name for Kaladin Brood because there's no more. A lot of people are giving up their names in these books, so this is another case of that. As I said, Kaladin Brood doesn't play a major role in this book, but he's just kind of there. And again, I think this book was a big way of, because I think Book 8 was kind of last time we saw, and I can't confirm or deny this, I haven't read Dust of Dreams and Crippled God yet, but it definitely seemed to be a case of Toll the Hounds was kind of an ending for a lot of those characters that we initially started with in Gardens of the Moon and stuff. Um, so this is kind of like an epilogue for some of these characters. But I guess we'll see whether my suspicions hold correct when we get to the next two books in the Book of the Fallen. Again, this publication-wise would have come out after, those two books. I would have known had I gone in that order. But I'm trying to intersplice these, so this would be chronologically, I think, where you would place it. Even though I know there's debate among that because there are some inconsistencies with the timeline placing of certain events and things, which Essamon just made. I'm only human. Me and him tried our best. But also something you have to remember about Essamon and Erickson, while they talk to one another, they also have their own lives, their own things going on. And they're not beholden to anyone but each other, really. The publishers may advise them on certain things, but if you think about something like the Star Wars Expanded Universe, which I've reviewed all of, by the way, you can check out if you're interested. There was a structure to it. People will tell you that it was filled to the brim with contradictions and lore-breaking things. No, never. It was never that bad. 30 plus years of continuity, and it held remarkably consistent. Sure, there were flaws here and there, but for the most part, it remained consistent. That's because Lucasfilm made a concerted effort to make sure most things fit in line with whatever. And I mean, so does Erickson and Esselmont. Like, they're not going out of their way to contradict one another. In fact, they try very hard to complement one another, but they are only human, and there's no Lucasfilm beating over their heads to make sure that they don't contradict anything. It's just the two of them talking back and forth. So sometimes inconsistencies happen. So I think some time placements here with certain things that are going to happen in Erickson's books moving down the line are a bit. I didn't notice it because I haven't read those other two books, but even still, I think Esselmont pretty much says himself that this book takes place after Toll the Hounds. So regardless of any timeline inadequacies or inaccuracies, this is where you would place it if you were reading chronologically. So we also get to see Raised again. Very cool. We love Raised, or at least now we do. We didn't like him in book 1, but now we like him because he's been a funny little guy. We meet Saul, and Lo Segula. They're kind of our big head spaces into the world of the Segula, where we get they're like Malazans, like kind of like they're Klingons, or they're Yeah, I don't know. I guess I'll just say Klingons for this series anyway. Not that they seem to have as much relevance as the Klingons do in Star Trek, but still, they're super fascinating in this book. Let me move on to book 2, Sceptre. Um, we have a nice scene between Brood and Tisrig. We also learn about this Segula word from the Segula when they call somebody I haven't even mentioned yet, named Yusik, which is a woman who's basically, she kind of fills a similar role as to Saren. Am I saying that right? Yeah, Saren from book 5. Um, she's not a mediator or negotiator or anything. She's just like, she's taking these guys where they want to go. So she's helping them along. But they call her Ishanai, which is outsider with countenance, because somebody gives them like a suggestion in this part of the book, and they go, "You're an outsider, we don't talk to you." And she's like, "Well, what am I?" And they're like, "Well, you're an Ishanai. You're an outsider, but with continence, because you're helping us. So you were like of us, but not of us. So like you are, because you're helping us. There's like a portion of you that is sort of like part of our part of us, you know." So like it was just an interesting little thing I wanted to mention. Um, we head over back to Kiska and Leoman as they're in this weird realm, and we get reintroduced to Teshrin, who I don't think I ever mentioned back in Return of the Crimson Guard. Kind of had a sacrificial moment, sort of, kind of. I kind of just completely glossed over it because, to be honest, I didn't really like Teshrin that much. Um, and I thought he was just seemingly dead and gone forever. But he's here, he's still alive, but he has amnesia, he doesn't remember who he is. We also get reintroduced to Topper, who's kind of doing his own thing. He's not really a part of the Malazans anymore because Malazans are ruled by Malik Rel, and Topper was pretty loyal to Lysine, which we didn't really know that, which I think is kind of nice that there's a little bit of a through line there with Topper, which is nice. He's not a big part of the book. I mean, he's in it for sure, but I thought that was a nice little thing for his character. We get this whole thing with this character Morn and this character Orchid, which I had forgotten to mention. Orchid, this big thing with her is that she's like half Tistiandi and half Draconin, which means she's got a bit of dragon in her or something. That was fascinating, and she's also like really old. Um, Also a character named Morn, which I saw this from the comments section of A Critical Dragon, so I didn't put the two and two together. But the seemingly implication that you're supposed to get from Morn is that he's actually Draconis, which I didn't capture because I'm stupid, but that is something there too. So, or at least A Critical Dragon says that seems to be the implication. So, um, Jiwan, who is a part of the Segula, no, sorry, is a part of the Rivi people. If you remember the Rivi people, wants Kaladin Brood to stand aside because Kaladin Brood does not want to fight, does not want to do certain things that will lead to more death and suffering. Because again, he's really struggling over the death of Animated Rake. Like he's distraught over it, and they feel like they need new leadership because they want to attack, they want to go to war. They're not thinking about the bigger picture of all the death that this will cause. Um, we jump ahead because I just kept reading and I didn't take notes like I was supposed to. I'm sorry. Um, Later on in the story, Torvald goes to talk to the Moranth people. Um, Yusik and Traveler have this really nice conversation. And then we jump back to Kiska and Leoman, and Teshrin has like basically a seizure when Kiska returns something to him. Um, and then there's this thing with Teshrin. I didn't know if he was going to die or not, so I was kind of like waiting to see. But he basically has Kroll, the Elder God, in him, like possessing him, sort of, kind of. But through the seizure and everything, and through what Kiska does, we basically have a merger, where instead of it being Cruel or Teshrin, it's this new character entirely, this middle ground. Um, there's a bunch of stuff I missed. I'm going to be completely honest. I just didn't write down. Book 3, Throne, though. We have a Stony cameo. It's like literally one paragraph. But this is like the big crescendo at Darushistan. A bunch of things are happening. We got the Tyrant, the Legate, who's doing stuff right now. We have the Morinth attacking with their ammunitions. We got the Segula doing stuff. Everything's going down, and Stony goes to a young boy in his bed and tells him to take cover, remain safe, blah, 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 blah. And she goes, and he says something, Mother, what do you mean? Da, 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 da. And she's like, now, Harlow. Oh, what's that? It's Stony and Harlow, and she is now taking care of him as mother, which is just really nice to see. It was a nice conclusion to that. Ducaire and Tesherin have a little moment when they go to the little tomb area place. And while this is all going on, also Ansie's having his whole little adventure over at the downed Moonspawn. Because, remember at the end of Memories of Ice, it fell down. And so Ansie and some other crew is exploring that. Again, I think it's setting up some things possibly for the next 2 books in the books in the Malazan Empire. But as for what it's actually contributing to ORB Sceptre Throne, it wasn't doing that much. We also have some characters named Lef, and what's the other one's name? But they're a bunch of fumbling idiots who somehow make it through unscathed, and they were fun. But I also like. I don't care enough about them, so I don't have too much to get to do with them. I'm sorry, I'm a terrible reviewer. But the big thing at the end is that Tesherin sort of sacrifices himself again. Although he doesn't die, but he basically sacrifices himself. And he also mentioned things of, like, no one else could do anything about this right now. So, like, all the gods are preparing for some big thing. I imagine for, like, the Crippled God scenario. Maybe a sale, I don't know. But that has been a continuing trend since Bone Hunters, is that the gods are playing a big, long game themselves. Amongst while the other immortal characters in this setting are doing their own thing, going on their own things. In the wider grand scheme, there are major, bigger things going on behind the scenes. And this has been going on for a while. So they're all preparing for this big conclusion, wherever that may be. But Tesherin isn't anchored to that, right? So he sacrifices himself because that's the job he's been given. That's what he needs to do. And so it's really amazing how Esselmon has managed to give me such a 3-dimensional character who started off as just like literally purely, basically, really like this, if not villain, outright antagonist in Gardens of the Moon, to this really redeemed kind of figure in this book. But at the end, we have a nice conversation with Kreppy, whatever you want to call him, and he decides from now on he's going to go by Tren, mix mash, Kroll and Tesherin. But yeah, there's a lot more that could be said. If you want more in-depth to the philosophical and more themes behind this book, I highly recommend you listen to A Critical Dragon and Philip Chase discuss this book. Spoiler chat, obviously. But I really enjoyed it. So far, it's my favorite of it so far. I know I missed out on a ton of stuff. The problem with reviews and being a human is that it really relies on what's been going on with your particular week or month or whatever's going on in your life. And this is the time of this recording, we're close to the holidays and everything, and things get really busy. So maybe my focus may have not been as attuned to this book as it should have been. But it also will provide great stuff for a reread too. But I did, enjoy the book regardless, and I think you will too. If you, Esmon's writing may not be the same as Erickson's, but he still always delivers a great tale and a great story and great characters and great themes throughout. And I thoroughly had a good time with it. From the characters that are crossing over from Erickson's works to his own original, to the more stuff we get with Segula, I think my biggest issue with this book in particular is literally just that even though we get a lot on Segula, we don't really get that much on the Morinth. Only as an addendum as to them being enemies of the Segula. I mean, we get a little bit, but I feel like there wasn't as much deep dive into them as there could have been, which I was disappointed by. But that's more of a me thing. But yeah, overall, I really enjoyed it. I think you will too, and hope you check it out. Up next, I have the last two books in the Book of the Fallen, Dust of Dreams, Crippled God, and then we'll finish that off with Blood and Bone and A Sail by Esselmont. So that's what you have to look forward to. And until then, guys, oh right, and then Kiska goes with Topper at the end of the story with Leomund. So that's pretty much it. I'll see you next time, and let's go find out what happens with the Cripple God, I guess. But you gotta subscribe to see that. So we'll talk about that then. Goodbye.